gracious ladies and gentlemen, it gives me the deepest pleasure to address you this blessed morning in the name of the great ascended Master Saint Germain, whom I knew so well and whom I am now with so eternally. I would like to call to your attention that in the course of an individual's life, there frequently come moments of doubt when it seems that the world scene does not appear in its proper perspective, and all the elements of society and personality seem to be a jumble, much the same as a puzzle, which needs the putting together of an adroit mind and consciousness. And at that moment, mankind does not always know just to whom to turn. I myself was in such a dilemma frequently, although I did not express these doubts to my associates, recognizing the need to be solicitous of those around me. I attribute all of this to the great guidance of the ascended Master Saint Germain, who by his wondrous love to me, which he made known through a release of cosmic wisdom, gave me that assurance in the business world whereby I seemed a pillar of strength to all those around me. They looked to me as to a benign elderly gentleman possessed with a great deal of endurance and vitality. They did not realize that all of the vitality which I manifested was from my God presence. It was a direct manifestation of that presence in my world. I would like to call to your attention, ladies and gentlemen, that it is very vital and important to each one of you that you recognize that God is a tangible, living being. Now, at first, this may seem quite a simple statement for me to make, and one lacking in profundity. But I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there are millions of people who do not recognize the tangibility of spiritual power. They are limited to the five senses, and this is a curtain which effectively veils from their view all of the wonders of heaven that are manifesting and bursting around the feet of mankind almost hourly. It is such a wonderful thing, such a great blessing, when that veil and curtain are raised and mankind are able to gaze upon the vibrant buoyancy of immortal life and to know that mankind are cared for in a more than ordinary way. It was such a wonderful experience to me when first I came into contact with Saint Germain, when I realized that he was a vibrant, living person, a great ascended master, one who could come from the great cosmic ethers with the swiftness of blue lightning and make himself known and felt. The tangibility of this great master flooded my being, and I was wholly aware of the fact that I was in the presence of great divinity. But the one particular quality which he imparted unto me above all others, which floods my soul at this moment with wonder, is the fact that God within me had the same desire of transformation as was resident within the being of Saint Germain. He made known unto me that it was the wonder of God's love that would impart to me also the full stature of an ascended master. He engendered in me great faith and courage, so that I had hope when faced with many vicissitudes in the business world and in family situations which have never been discussed before you for various reasons, that the great light of God would safely pull me through all those conditions, and that ultimately I would be given the gift of my ascension. There was a specific reason why it was possible for the Master to do this for me, and I would like to point out to all of you that some of you may have occasionally felt that the same interest has not been taken in you individually as has been taken in others. I would like to call to your attention, blessed ones, that the karmic road, the road towards spiritual evolution, is always one of merit, and those individuals who do not fully recognize the fact that they are being given that which they merit, are only making a mistake, which is a form of small rebellion against God. And it would be far better, blessed ones, if you would just cast that aside and have in your feelings the wonderful idea that God is coming to you and is going to make known to you in due course of time all of the wonders of his great love. You must recognize the need to place yourselves in his hands, and to place yourselves in the hands of the great masters without conditioning in the human level. So many individuals so quickly fall into the mass thoughts and thinking of mankind, and it is therefore quite difficult for them to enter into the full buoyancy of the ascended master's octave. I pause now for a moment in order that you might reflect upon the words that I have spoken. One of the great joys that Saint Germain brought to me was the wonderful knowledge of my beloved Nada, the restoration and union of her to me after I had thought that she had passed from the screen of life, the wonder of her ascension. Any of you who have ever lost loved ones and have attended a funeral ceremony and are aware of the great emptiness that comes to the consciousness at that moment, can then imagine the restoration of a life thought lost, the great knowledge, the great understanding that floods the being when one is made aware that one that they dearly love and have loved for so long is in reality with God, with the great ascended masters, is wondrous to behold. My beloved wife, Nada Rayborn, has therefore desired to step forth and radiate her love into this audience this morning. Will you now then receive her love as your pianist plays a melody of sweetness? I present the Lady Nada Rayborn. How gracious and lovely is the cooperation of heaven, for in the garden was where I expressed such deep love to my beloved wife Nada. And therefore it is fitting that in this melody her sweet presence should manifest its heart's love to you. We would like to call to your attention that many of you who are at times afflicted by elements of doubt and shadow must recognize the constancy of the sun of your being that shines behind each cloud. You have heard it said that every cloud has a silver lining, but these words seem poor consolation at times to individuals during their moments of trial. Men must recognize the need then not to necessarily make decisions during moments of trial, but to wait until the clouds have rolled away and the cycle has passed. The words, "This too shall pass," when spoken, are a fiat of authority, which Saint Germain taught to me as an old mantram. When correctly understood and applied to life, it tends to act as an eraser, to wipe the slate of life clean, and to remove unwanted pictures from the consciousness. This too shall pass, stated 3 times, and followed by the light of God never fails 3 times, creates a mantram of Christ consciousness to clean the consciousness of unwanted conditions and bring forth a positive victory over negative elements which may at times be projected into the consciousness of mankind. The elixir of life which Saint Germain gave to beloved Godfrey was a special qualification of spiritual fire, which he was permitted to receive because of a certain advancement in his own life. Individuals today must understand that a specific pattern is often not followed in each case, and that each individual is not given the same identical treatment by the Ascended Masters. Some people are privileged and blessed with a direct vision of the Ascended Masters, and others are not. This does not necessarily mean that the one to whom the Master appears is more advanced than others. In some cases it is true that it does signify certain spiritual advancement. In other cases it merely signifies that the spiritual sight is quickened to a greater degree. For in many cases the Master stands before those who do not see the Master, and because they do not see him, they do not really realize that he is there. However, through the power of radiation, the beloved Master Saint Germain has made himself known to many of you, and he will continue to do so if you will keep your attunement high and worthy of his great love. Quite naturally, it must be understood that although the Masters have the power to multiply their images, so that all of us can at will project ourselves to many individuals at the same time, simultaneously, it is also a great law that individuals must be worthy. The many times which beloved Saint Germain came to us in our home was an occasion for great rejoicing, and we were able to feel such wonderful uplift in our consciousness that many times it was as though I floated upon air. It hardly seemed as though my feet touched the ground. I recall after my contact with the atomic accelerator that I had some difficulty in climbing stairs, for it seemed as though my feet were not in contact with them as I passed up and down, but rather as though I were floating. This feeling persisted for some time, and it was extremely difficult for me to adjust to conditions of the body as previously. I mention this to you for the simple reason that it may illustrate to your consciousness that this power of spiritual exaltation can be naturally expected to have some effects upon the consciousness and upon the consciousness within the body. You need never have any fear concerning this, but rest yourselves completely in your great God presence. Remember, it is a wonderful experience to be transferred from the octaves of earth to heaven, and therefore when the glorious ascension is given to mankind, it is quite naturally a very unusual experience, so different from anything else that you have ever experienced. I realize myself that I was not cognizant of my physical birth in the outer when I came into being as Daniel Rayborn. However, some individuals are actually conscious at birth and are given the knowledge of themselves entering the physical body in form. This, however, did not happen to me, but I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, I was conscious upon leaving. For when I made the ascension in the light, it was a beautiful occasion. One moment I was there in the presence of the world, and then the great dazzling light enfolded me. It was as though beautiful probing fingers of light searched deep within the very heart of my being and found there some form of numbness of consciousness, and as though these fingers of light warmed and revivified some wonderful reality within me. They probed my vital interiors as fingers of flame, and all of the pain of human consciousness and awareness of the bones, arthritic conditions, if you will, immediately vanished. All conditions of age were gone. All conditions which you might consider as shortness of breath vanished. All appearances of age were immediately removed. I was aware of the fact that the probing flame of God's identity was renewing the cells of my being and transforming them into a permanent body of spiritual light. But oh, how glorious it was! To be born of flame is so much different than merely to be born into the flesh. And I recognized then that it was the glory of the Christ ascension given unto me. Somehow business interests and interests of the world tend to pale into insignificance when one considers the virtue of God's gift of immortal life, the vestments of eternity being formed around one's heart flame. Oh, the glory and the surge of power, the supreme blessing, the contact with the angelic host, but above all was the great feeling of union with one's own mighty I Am presence. I recall a thought passing through my consciousness that it was similar to standing outside during the noontime and gazing up to the heavens and recognizing that not a star was visible, and then suddenly being transferred to the hour of midnight and seeing that the entire sky was full of beautiful points of light. For I became aware of regions of the cosmos not even thought of or conceived by me before, and I felt a kinship with wonderful individual minds and hearts, a reunion with those whom I had long suffered absence from. Beloved ones, it is true that the mercy of the great cosmic light was such that I was not aware of the vacancy or the absence of these blessed friends of light, but I knew them on the instant when I was able to see them again and to feel their great love, no longer passing through my flesh and the density of form, but directly contacting the flame within my heart. And then I knew on the instant that nothing in this world was significant or worthy of anything by comparison to the ascension. And I recall the final thought that passed through my mind as I rose upward into the great light to be absorbed was, oh, if I could only tell them. And I thought to myself then, if only I could make known to the whole world. And I realized afterward by reflection that this thought has filled the mind and consciousness of every one who has ascended. For all have felt, oh, if I could only tell them. This is the desire that we feel, to reach down into human consciousness with all of its density, its almost suffocating outer conditions, and to say, oh, do put all that you have into your search for your divinity, that you might receive the blessing of the ascension. But, oh, ladies and gentlemen, I must bring to you a word of caution. For now that I have had contact with Archangel Jophiel, with the god and goddess Meru, and with the great and wondrous friend of light, your own Cthulhu, on higher levels. And now that I have consorted directly with beloved Jesus, and have sat at the table with him, have had him hold my hand, and felt his arm around my neck, I must convey to you that you must not shirk your own outer responsibilities. You must not shirk your responsibilities to God. You must render unto Caesar a part of that which is Caesar's, but do not be afraid to cheat a little, for God winks at that. But you must, above all, recognize the need to keep balance, to be at peace with one another, to be ladies and gentlemen, to reflect the gentility of Saint Germain, to show understanding and kindness, to be patient with men, to bear afflictions with hope for freedom and deliverance from them, and to recognize that behind the curtain of world Maya is the light of eternal truth shining onward forever. The great star of your being is a star of hope, but it has an anchor point within your heart. And when you come to understand the meaning of that anchor point, you will recognize that it is a thread of light that connects you with the Most High God. That your I Am presence and the I Am presence within the heart of the great central sun are one. You will recognize the foolishness that mankind submit to by their false examination of the fabric of one another, and how as they gaze upon imperfection they absorb it into themselves. You will recognize how as men gaze upon perfection they will absorb that into themselves. And so as Saint Germain so often said to me, what you put your attention upon you become. And therefore if you would become an ascended being as I am, put your attention upon the Christ, upon the light, upon Saint Germain, upon your freedom, upon the glory of this teaching and the mastery of your worlds. Who can deny you your destiny but yourselves? Who can affirm it but yourselves? Truly, the ancient inscription over the ancient temples of old, which read, "Man, know thyself," is truth. And if I could add a word to it, it would be, "Man, know thyself as God." Man, know thyself as good. Man, know all life as good. This does not mean that you need subject yourself to the brainwashing tactics of the world, or be affected by those individuals who by reason of ignorance and lack of understanding serve in a limited capacity, partly wedded to matter and materiality, and partly wedded to higher ideals. No man can serve two masters, for either they will love the one and hate the other, or they will be lukewarm in consciousness. All must recognize the great need to be firm with themselves in handling themselves as children of the light, unflinching, unyielding, uncompromising where the holy cause is concerned. Other men do not have the responsibility toward yourselves that you do, each of you individually, and with the assistance of your great twin ray. Each of you must find your way back to the great starry body of light from whence you came, the matrix of eternal purity, the peace and the eternality of the ascended octave. I give you my gift of light. Will you place before the altar here one of the golden chairs? In the name of Saint Germain and the entire spirit of the Great White Brotherhood, I call to Chananda in the Cave of Light for the instantaneous magnetization of this chair, the stepping up of the vibratory action around this altar. I call to the great divine director for the resurgent energies of Christ's accomplishment to be magnified in a beam of direct light substance to pass through the substance of this chair and to energize it for the space of 1 hour. Ladies and gentlemen, we have received permission from the Great White Brotherhood for an action of 1% radiation of the atomic accelerator to be anchored in this chair. We ask you to share it with one another for the coming hour. Ladies and gentlemen, in the name of the Great White Brotherhood, I thank you. We have heard from our beloved brother, Daniel Rayborn. He has given us a great gift. There is now anchored for the space of 1 hour until 1:15 approximately by my watch, the energy of 1% of the radiation of the atomic accelerator. This may seem like a very small portion to you, but it will give you, if you had 50% of your energy already transmuted, it would give you your ascension. So you can take turns, as he has said, in sitting in the chair. I hope that no one will try to usurp their time in the chair. How many people are here? About 40, 50? Well, no one should be there longer than a minute, I would say.